I'm Bill Mogridge. I'm lucky to be the new director here. And this is the first event in our NDA National Design Awards celebration of finalists and winners. And most important, in my opinion, is the Lifetime Achievement Award. That's a little bit of an in-joke. I'd like to introduce, to begin with, Jane Thompson. Just ask her to stand up and receive a round of applause for being this year's winner. So Design Research, you know, this beautiful book, which you can find upstairs later and hear more about tonight. This really represents the story of the emporium that Jane and her husband Benjamin developed over 2 decades after the Second World War. And it really brought modern living to American homes in a way that had never happened before. It is a wonderful book, and perhaps the next person to ask to stand up is Alexandra Lange, who co-authored the book with Jane. Alexandra? And you're going to see quite a lot of Michael Bierut, who designed it, because he'll be introducing everybody else as our moderator this evening. Before he's... Okay, good. And before I ask him to take over, I'd just like to mention a couple of other events that are happening as part of this series of celebrating the National Design Awards. Next is on October the 7th in this room, where Ralph Kaplan will be at one of Bill's design talks to talk about his life and work. And during National Design Week, which is from October the 9th to the 17th, the museum is free and open to the public, and there's lots of stuff happening. We have design for kids, teen design fair, winners panel, design films, and business of design. You can see more about those on the website. And I do have to thank a few people who've made this possible. The sponsorship for NDA, partly Bloomberg, partly Procter & Gamble. Sponsors for our media, Fast Company and New York Magazine, and the National Design Week, made possible in part by Target. So enough of that, and over to Michael Bierut, who will tell you about everything else that's going to happen.
Thank you very much, Bill, and thank all of you for coming tonight. As a young person, when I first became aware of what design was and the fact that I might be interested in it, I was in high school, and it was, I was doubly cursed. I was in high school in the early 70s and in suburban Cleveland, Ohio. So I knew there was this thing called design out there somewhere, but it was hard to find where it was. And I remember trying to even find the words to describe to my mom that I wanted a clock radio that didn't have fake wood grain on it. And I sort of couldn't even kind of like make her understand what, you know, what I was asking for. And all she was starting to understand was something was wrong with me. A few years passed, and I was a student at the University of Cincinnati, and I had an internship at WGBH Television in Boston in the late 70s. And they were located just adjacent to the campus of where the Harvard Business School is. And some of you might know where that is, but right across the bridge was Cambridge, Massachusetts. And every once in a while, I think twice that summer, I got taken across the river to a restaurant called Harvest. It was a big treat. You go with the boss and the big shots, and the intern would come along and have two good meals a whole summer. That was me. And that was a nice place, but the nicest place of all was a store called DR, and that was what I was looking for. That was sort of, you know, I'd been chained in a cave in Cleveland looking at the shadows on the wall, and suddenly I saw DR, and I realized this was looking directly into pure, clear sunlight. Design research. A few years pass, and I get a call from a woman who I knew was responsible for it, named Jane Thompson, who said she was thinking about putting together a book about the legacy of DR. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a real challenge. The legacy was in a bunch of boxes, lots and lots and lots of boxes, and there was a lot of it. The legacy was stupendous. Jane herself is stupendous. Her daughter Sheila is stupendous. And when they came around, luckily I have a Bostonian working on my team named Tamara McKenna, who said, design research. I love design research. Can I work on this book, please? And I said, yes, Tamara, you can work on this book. It consists currently of a bunch of boxes, and it must be turned into a book. So Tamara volunteered to do the production design of it. My brilliant designer at Pentagram, Eve Ludwig, really marshaled the whole thing and worked with Alexandra and Jane and Sheila and the whole team to make it happen. And so now, as you'll see upstairs, we have a lovely book about design research. This evening, we're going to really be talking about what's happened in the wake of stores like Design Research to retailing and how retailing is practiced today in the 21st century and what its prospects are moving deeper into the century. And we have three very distinguished panelists who are very well chosen to address those topics. But before we get into that, I thought I would let Jane Thompson, the recipient of the this year's Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Design Awards, say a few words about DR and about the project that she's been working on for all these years. So please welcome again Jane Thompson.
All right, I'll rise up. Thank you. I don't have to say anything because he just said it all. That's wonderful. I don't have a canned speech. I do have some canned notes. And I really wanted to make a transition between what these wonderful people have agreed to talk about and what you as an audience of various ages, I'm sure, actually know. Could I just do an audience poll? Is there, who in this room has been personally in a design research store in their life? Well, it's a pretty damn good selection. You're all very loyal and very smart. I guess I don't have to explain very much about what DR was, and I can eclipse all of the. I really wanted to start this way. Once upon a time, there was a store. Gertrude Stein would say, "A store is a store is a store, and not much more." But it was much more after the war. That started in 1946. And the founder, Ben Thompson, called it design research, and he researched. And that's what he did. He found great things that nobody had ever had in this country before. And I won't go through the changes of lifestyle, which is what it was all about. It started with modern houses, but the most significant part that I got to was the changes. The greatest changes were in the life of women, and he was right on track for that. Supporting it. I remembered that we grew up with garter belts, stockings, hats on Sunday, tight waists, crinoline skirts, and white gloves whenever we walked on the streets. Now, some of you may remember this. And when these wonderful, colorful shifts came from Finland with no waists and great freedom, I mean, we were completely liberated. I mean, it was women's lib started in design research, and it happened in design research. We must never forget that. Well, there's a wonderful story. It's all in the book, so I won't recite how this really was the first lifestyle store, but we invented the thing. The name came along later. But footnote, it is not IKEA. There's a lot of confusion about successors, but that's not it. A group of us spent 4 years putting this story together, and we tracked not only ourselves, but dozens of old friends who had been in the store and had stories that they had not told. And this was really very revealing, and Alexandra did a marvelous job of interviewing and finding out who would shop there, who had had love affairs there, and even some had epiphanies about the whole meaning of life. So we'll leave that to your reading of the book. I just want to say that now what provoked these great friends to come is that this is 60 years later, and the marketplace is flourishing in an entirely different economic and a technical world of digital communication. I don't have to tell you that. But the virtual marketplace really troubles me. This is where customers are really often many levels away from actual contact with merchandise. And if you remember DR, it was all about sight, smell, touch. Please sit on the furniture and find out if it's comfortable. And this doesn't happen in catalogs or over the TV. There are catalogs and there are plenty of operations that have no point of sale contact whatsoever anymore. But still, on city streets and malls, the retail marketplace survives and grows, and outstanding merchants use not just catalogs, but real innovative stores to connect with people and to convert them into purchasers and followers of brands and so on. So this is the point of interest that I have. It is the store as the marketplace, which has always been the public space in which people gathered and exchanged whether they knew each other or not. I think design research served this purpose very amply in many communities. So I will just repeat that there was a great team. It was Sheila McCullough, my sole consultant in finding every picture that we ever had and needed or fact about design research. Michael and his team, who gave expressions both word and image, I think, as one thing, and perhaps they've not been so successfully married before. Eve and Tamara McKenna. And then I think tonight we have Lynn Shanahan here I haven't seen, but I want to say that she's leading a U.S. expansion of Marimekko, Finland. It's coming into New York, has a new showroom, and is going into many new branches throughout this country. Now that's a news item. I don't think it's been announced before. My own team here that has worked on this expansion and this exhibition, and the one that we did in Cambridge, all originals from the 1970s still. Blaise Gallo is a restaurant designer, Karen Lewis, graphic designer, Susan Ward, a textile design curator, and Pratap Talwar, my partner in architecture and technical and visual foundation for many of the things that we tried to do. So that is my story, but I think let's leap into the future because we have marvelous talent to tell us what's coming next in the next, how many years? Yeah. How many years are we looking at? 15, 50.
Jane, thank you very much. So on to the future, as Jane said. Our panelists, I'll introduce now. Starting on your right, we have Jenna Lyons. Jenna joined J.Crew in 1990 and is currently president and executive creative director of J.Crew Group, Inc. She helped grow the J.Crew brand into that rare creation, a multi-million-dollar mass retail with serious fashion credibility. You can ask the honorary chairwoman of the Cooper-Hewitt National Design Awards, the First Lady of the United States, about that. Her staffers follow her lead, as do all the millions and millions of shoppers who rely on Jenna's picks to kind of make their own mix and match sensibilities as they go along. She was a juror for this year's National Design Awards as well. Glenn Senk, sitting in the middle of our three panelists here, has been Chief Executive Officer of Urban Outfitters since 2007 after spending 8 years at Anthropologie. Before that, Glenn's experience was at Williams-Sonoma, Habitat in London, and Bloomingdale's here in New York. Under his watch, the offerings at Urban Outfitters, and I will here quote Wikipedia because they're always accurate, have evolved from vintage, bohemian, retro, hipster, ironically humorous, kitschy apparel and furniture to include luxury brands and designer collaborations. Anthropologie has just recently moved into the original Harvard Square location, long occupied and built especially for DR originally. So there's a little bit of a legacy happening here on stage too. And then finally, immediately next to me, Rob Forbes is the founder, best known to you as the founder of Design Within Reach, which is still considered the leading retail destination for modern design in the United States, and perhaps second only to the Cooper-Hewitt in taking a lead in terms of modern design education through the many catalogs and its website that so many people have seen. In 2007, Rob left DWR to launch Public, which is based on his personal passion for bicycles and his corollary desire to reduce our dependency on cars and to think more intelligently and artfully about the way we get around and connect with our cities and communities. Before DWR, Rob spent time also at Williams-Sonoma, at Selfridges in London, and at the Nature Company, and at Smith & Hawkins. So these are real retailers up here who really understand what makes us shop, what makes us buy, what makes us happy. And starting with that, I think, I'd ask Jenna. Jane mentioned the fact that people claim to have had in DR epiphanies about the meaning of life. Did you have any such epiphany at DR or any other store that you remember from your childhood?
An epiphany, wow, it's loud. Epiphany about the meaning of life, wow, I would say probably...
A more mild epiphany, perhaps.
I think I'd probably have had epiphanies about how I shop and how other people shop. And I think that's one of the things that we're sort of talking about and I'm interested in is that, people at this stage, there's so much information, like they need to be told, they need someone to help curate and sort of cut through all the noise. And to me, those stores that really did it for me. I remember the first time I went to Conrad's when I was in England years ago and sort of seeing, a really nice selection of things that really someone had picked and carefully chosen and said, okay, this is what I want to show to you and this is the environment with which I want to show it to you. And it sort of changes your point of view. It may not be how you want to live, it may not be what you particularly want, but it's showing it to you with a clear point of view. And at the end of the day, like, that looks beautiful, whether it's not what you want. It just looks much better. And I think that's something, again, growing up in California, strip mall hell, it was like, I didn't have a lot of really beautiful shops. I had probably been to Liberty of London years ago visiting my grandparents, and that was sort of one of those other situations where it was like the actual environment of the store was so magical at Liberties of London that I felt really kind of taken with it. And I thought everything looked prettier in that store. Just things looked better, and I wanted things more. I think the same with Conrad's. It was sort of the opposite of that. It was like the store was spare. It was very kind of clean, but it had a very, it was curated. I felt happy being in that store, and I think it made me want to stay longer. And I think that was the first kind of shopping moment where I felt like shopping, other than just hanging out with my girlfriends and like spending all my babysitting money, shopping was fun, and that really engaged me in a different way than I'd ever really been engaged before.
Glenn, do you have a similar childhood memories?
I think I'm shallower than Jenna because I do recall having epiphanies. And for me, great retailing is about emotion. And I will never forget shopping with my mother, who wore white gloves and made me wear saddle shoes and short shorts, and going to Lord & Taylor. And I will not forget the smell. I will not forget the turtle soup. I will not forget the staff. And that was my earliest memory. But when I think about all of the stores that have inspired me over the years, they usually elicit unbelievable emotional reactions from me. Where I remember the first time I saw 10 Corso Como, which is one of my favorite stores. I wanted to move in. I wanted to, find the founder and hug her. And I did want to change the way I lived. And it did make me happier. It made me just feel like the world was a better place, albeit, for a few minutes. So for me, the best retailers are authentic. They're emotional. They're innovative, and I have to say, Jane, when I saw the book, it brought up all those reactions for me again, because you and your husband were so innovative. You were such pioneers, and for me, the best retailers are just fearless, and that's what they do.
When we see the thing you're talking about, is it a person's sensibility? Can you get to it with a spreadsheet or with a PowerPoint presentation?
No. For me, I think there's all different kinds of retail. For the business that we're in the business of emotion, and we're in the business of personal connection. I don't believe that a good buyer can buy any category, a good retailer can retail anything. I think that someone has to absolutely love the customer they serve, and I think they have to love the product or the brand that they work on to truly connect and to truly be innovative. The spreadsheet analysis, is a different kind of retail.
Right. Rob, you're nodding. Does this match your sort of feelings about it?
No, that matches my feeling. Yeah, but also I was thinking about, I didn't have significant retail experiences as a child. I grew up in South Pasadena, and I don't remember retailing other than surf shops that actually had great boards in there and the smell of the resin, and that was kind of my experience. I think honestly the first significant retail experience that I had on an emotional level was probably going, I was thinking first of the Mercado, the large market in Guadalajara when I was a teenager, and it was this incredible emporium of food and products and animals and textures. This is stuff you don't see in South Pasadena, but it was really extraordinarily memorable, and spending all day in there looking for, I remember we were on a search for some fresh peyote buttons and other things, but we weren't looking for fashion. But it was an incredible experience. And then next, and that was as a teenager, on a surf trip to Mexico. Then the next one was really going into the food hall in Harrods in London. When I went there was just an extraordinary, rich experience of levels of complexity and the stuff that was there. And kind of, I had moved to London and wasn't having such an easy time with the culture there, but considered it to be a little bit staid. But it was one just incredibly rich, wonderful, colorful, fantastic, super environment.
Is like you mentioned, Conrad's, Jenna. Both of you guys worked in London. I've heard it said that the British is sort of the Britain's like a country of shopkeepers, and they sort of have that down. Is that sort of do you think there's a peculiarly national way of retailing that you'd get that makes an American experience different from a British experience, different from one in Guadalajara or someplace else?
How long were you at Habitat?
I was there 3 years.
3 years? Yeah. So do you want to take that?
Well, I mean, we retail in the UK now, so we have I think 18 stores in the UK, and I lived there many years, and it is different. But the beautiful thing about the world is every place is different. I think if I had to highlight one difference, I think that the Brits have a higher regard for design as it relates to consumer goods. I think in this nation we do great with automobiles and computers and so on, but they have a tremendous appreciation for textile design, furniture design, tabletop design, and so on. And that's been that was my experience there, and we have a lot of Brits working for us now.
You want to add anything?
I would agree with that, and also that in going to Conrad's store was very important to me in seeing that, and that was kind of a standout on that level, because I don't think that the Brits did modern quite so well, and so this was kind of a standout. I worked in Selfridges, which was a very interesting department store, but I would give the U.S. a lot of credit for a lot of the specialty, unique, quirky, odd things that you find out on the street that weren't so much part of the British retail experience. There was a lot more standardization on the high streets, and a lot more repetition than you might think.
Yeah. Is there? It occurs to me, and that there might be. The people who are good at this are motivated not just by exercising their taste, but also by a certain kind of sense of mission. And I think it was certainly true with DR, where the sense was, there was this great stuff out there in the world, and people didn't have to settle for less than great stuff, and they didn't have to pay $1 million for great stuff. It was both democratic and just really required just a little bit of help to find it. And in so much of the world, particularly back then, it was hard. So much of the retail world in the United States, it was hard to find this stuff. But I know, Jenna, I mean, most of what you sell has to do with the most intimate ways people present themselves. It's one thing to kind of have a chair or a table setting in your home, but you're really talking about clothing. And I think there sort of is this sense that there is sort of a J. Crew lifestyle in a way that the J. Crew point of view enables. Is that part of the mission?
I mean, I think it's a pretty loaded question. I think it's also a question that evolves, and I think it's something that we're constantly talking about. Just because one of the things that happens, especially with our business, where we have customers who are 22 years old, and we have customers who are 42 years old, and we have customers who are 72 years old. And how do you talk to that woman? How do you make her envision herself in this particular situation, in this lifestyle, when you have a mannequin to talk to her? And so how do you do that? And what are those tools that you use to do that? And some of the things that we've discovered, and I think it goes back to a little bit again, sort of talking about that idea of curation, which I think is sort of something that you really pioneered. giving her other things that are about her life. Maybe it's a book, or maybe it's something that she remembers from early on. Maybe it's a record cover, or maybe it's something else that kind of connects to her life in some way that makes her experience that t-shirt or that sweater differently, or gives her a different, maybe she stops for a moment longer and says, oh, I'm going to stay here and look at this for a little while longer because that's interesting to me. And how do you engage the customer in a new level? I think especially now with, we talked a little bit about the digital marketplace. I think it's messing with our world completely. I think it's changing everything. Everyone's so cluttered. There's just too much to look at. And so it does become even more important. I think we have a huge selection online, but we keep our store selection more tight because it's just, people can't handle it. It's just too much. And also, you're not standing for anything. So I think that's something I think is incredibly important, is sort of taking a stand, but then also giving people different ways to experience it and ways of entry into the brand.
Yeah, in the latest New Yorker, or in the recent New Yorker, there's a profile of your boss, Mickey Drexler, and one of the more memorable passages is he goes into a store, into a J. Crew store that he finds less than satisfactory, and
it's not a good moment.
But it's very entertaining to read, and also rings very true. And you sort of kind of can tell that the reason the stores work is because someone knows what happens when they don't work. Like when you forget about J. Crew, but if you go into a retail environment that's really not working, what are the characteristics of it?
I mean, I think that one of the things that you mentioned earlier, and I think you brought this up, is the idea of the shopkeeper. And I think you can't take away the importance of the person running the store. We walk into stores, they all get the same, a big portion of the stores get the same directive, so to speak. This is what the mannequin should look like. This is sort of the general kind of tone of what the store should feel like. But you can walk into a store and there's a store director who's pulled that store together beautifully. Everything is humming. They've rigged the mannequins beautifully. They've presented everything perfectly. The store is clean. The managers and all the team there look fantastic. You walk in and they're like, hi, can I help you? If you need anything, I'm over here. All of those things have to sing. It's not just about, oh, here's the table and here's the setting and here's the glass. There is a personal touch that is incredibly important. And I think, again, it goes back to, as the digital world gets more invasive, how do you kind of connect? And I think the shopkeeper on every level is important. I think, interestingly enough, I think America is a little bit more of a massive, we're a mass brand, yeah. I can admit that. And, so how do you connect? But, I think if you take a country like England, they're not, they don't have as much of that. They don't have, you have individual shopkeepers are sort of invested in making everything look perfect. And they've curated it themselves. They want you to see it. And so it's important to have that shopkeeper, that person who's running that particular store, care just as much. And if they don't, it shows. And it shows in everything. It's not one thing that's off. It's everything.
Yeah. How many stores does J. Crew have?
Oh, I think we're at 220. I don't even know the number. 220? Yeah. I don't know.
And how many years?
Well, we have about 160 anthropologies and about 170 urban outfitters, and I think 35 free people, and then 1 terrain. Yeah.
And how do you make them do it? What tools do you have at your disposal to make them do it right? That's what fascinates me. Is actually
we have I have a tremendous amount of respect for J. Crew, but we have a very different model. Every one of our stores is different, and what we do is we empower each store manager or each store management team to be their store's owner, and we spend a lot of time teaching them. We spend a lot of time working on being the kind of company that retains people, and then we provide great measurements so they can see if what they're doing is working or not working. But it really starts with the kind of people you hire, and it goes back to they've got to love people. At the end of the day, we are all shopkeepers, and we're here to make people feel good. And nothing is worse than a retailer who doesn't love, his or her customer. So if you hire people who really love people, it's going to be a good experience, and that's what we do.
Yeah. When I was talking about mission before, Rob, one of the things I was thinking about was clearly when you started Design Within Reach, I think it really had to do with a sense that sort of very similar to the original sensibility that Jane and Ben Thompson had, which was that there was this stuff out there and not enough people who would love it didn't know it was available to them in a way. Hence the name, hence the store, hence the concept, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was also, I had tired of being a marketing VP at different companies that had grown large through discounting and other measures. And I actually believed that the product that was out there that could be curated and edited was actually better. Maybe an arrogant thing, but and I kind of wanted to prove that the American public wasn't as dumb as people said, and that if you put together a good proposition and the products are well done and created a context for it that was meaningful. And a lot of the mission that I had there was also to connect the maker of the product with the product themselves. So you're not just buying a chair. Here are the values of the person who created it, but to have people make that connection that there are actually people behind the stuff. So there was a lot of editorial and biographies of famous people like yourself. And
I think that goes to what you were saying, Jenna, too, about sort of the book or the record cover that can help provide a context for the sweater.
I mean, I think it goes also. I think you mentioned something, and I think it's so important. It's like there has to be integrity in what you're doing. Interesting enough, with all this idea of collaborations and you partnering and showing sort of who's behind what, and I know you buy lots of different things from different brands, but you have to believe in why someone picked that. You have to believe that they picked that for the reason because they honor it, they view that item as special, and here's why. And you have to back that up and tell somebody, I think now everyone's trying to do collaborations, and it's funny because we hear for some of the people that we've been working with, we've been approached by all these different people. And, and it's interesting. It's like you have to make those choices really carefully, and I think, but you also have to then stand behind it and give some integrity to the reason you made that choice, why you love it, and honor it, and sort of present it in a way that the customer can understand. Like, okay, I understand why J.Crew or Design Within Reach or Anthropology picked that item. They're giving me the information, and that's important. People want information. They want to believe you. They want to believe that there's integrity behind that choice, and and the product itself. And I think that's incredibly important. And people see through it, which is amazing.
If it's not done honestly.
Absolutely. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, blogs, as much as I'm not a huge fan, I'm so intimidated by the technological world. It's just so big. But there's just, there is a lot of information that you can kind of see about yourself and sort of what people are saying. And it's interesting. People really talk about that. They talk about the choices that you make and why you make them. And they talk about the brands that you pick. I mean, it's incredibly interesting. And yeah, they see through it. If they don't like what you're doing, they let you know.
Yeah, that sounds like one of the ways that retailing may have changed since when you guys all started. That there's much more of, whether it's distorted or not fully accurate or exaggerated, whatever it is, there's like a feedback loop that kind of comes back from customers in a way.
For me, I actually embrace it. I love it. In the old days, if I wanted to know what was going on in the store, I had to go and sell, or work the fitting rooms. And now all I need to do is go and look at our blogs or our ratings and reviews. So, and I think if you run an honest business, the truth prevails online. I call social media word of mouth on steroids. And we've never advertised as a company, and we'll do in excess of $2.5 billion this year. We've never spent a penny on advertising. So all of our business is garnered by word of mouth. So social media is our friend. I mean, we had no Facebook functionality a year ago. We have over 1 million Facebook fans right now. So the power is quite extraordinary.
And I think just to say what I'm intimidated by is more just the keeping up part. I agree. I think it's an incredible tool, and I think it's amazing. And we do look at it, and it's a lot to keep up with. I think that's the part that I find is overwhelming. That's why I like shopping.
Yeah. Well, if a consultant came up and said, "Look, we've figured it out, and really between real estate, employee paychecks, inventory, transportation, everything else. Look at the spreadsheet. It's too expensive to actually maintain these physical stores. You could actually make more money doing it all online."
Oh, I mean, it already exists. That model exists. I mean, there are plenty of businesses that you could say, and honestly, if you sat down with our CFO and we talked about the difference between bricks and mortar and online, absolutely. But the fact of the matter is, the brand does not exist in the ether. And I think if you want to have a brand that people, I think a company like Net-a-Porter, they're only online. And that's, again, they face certain challenges. There is not the same kind of real connection. They're selling so many different brands. It's a totally different model, but at the same time, they're lacking their connection with their customers in some ways and sort of talking to them and sort of what they've been experiencing. They actually like the idea of opening a store. But the fact of the matter is, bricks and mortar actually is not better than online financially. But there's no doubt that it sort of creates the circle. I mean, you need all of those pieces and parts to kind of create the whole. I don't particularly like a world where one doesn't exist. We want to be able to share more with our customers and have that direct relationship. And just the experience, I think, is fantastic.
Yeah. Rob, do you agree?
Well, yeah, I do, but I think that you have to, and also in perspective, we're sort of, and I'm a little small retailing, these guys are much larger, but I'm saying, but we don't exist in the world of specialty retailing, where things like authenticity and authority and reality and that stuff really, really matter. But the world of retail is broad, so there are like huge. I mean, we're all dwarfed by the size of the Walmarts and the Targets and people who are known not by what they don't carry, but on the broad range of stuff that they do, and probably have to measure their business on different kinds of statistics and reach a different group of people. But I think in our world, it's that what do you do to have veracity and to seem really honest? Because if we don't, our business and our margins and our identity become washed out.
Right.
So.
I think there are a couple of things. We can't ignore what's going on online. I mean, Amazon is 16 years old, and it did $25 billion in business last year, so 10 times the size of J.Crew or Urban Outfitters, Inc. in a shorter period of time. Having said that, the most recent research shows that in apparel, the average customer who shops one channel, be it retail, direct to consumer, e-commerce, or a catalog, spends roughly $240 a year. The average customer who shops two channels from that same retailer spends about 2.5 times that, and the average customer who shops all three channels buys 5 times that. So there's a lot of evidence that the most powerful format is multi-channel retailing. I agree with Jenna that in the last couple of years there's a tremendous amount of noise online, and I think that what's happening is that the Amazon experience of being able to buy today and have it on your doorstep tomorrow, or shop up, or name your poison, that used to be a competitive advantage. It's no longer a competitive advantage. We've all caught up to that. So now I think the competitive advantage is cutting through the noise. So I think people who have an edit or a curation or a brand that has limited distribution are ultimately going to be the ones who win. And I think the brick and mortar experience helps build that.
Mm-hmm. I also think you can't underestimate the power of women. I think it's a really different conversation when you talk about women versus men. I think what we see in our men's stores versus what we see in our women's stores, completely different. Women are social shoppers. They are social beings. They want to look at something on each other and say, is this cute? It's an experience for them, and they exist in a different world than men. Want to come in, they want to get their thing, and they want to get out. So we approach them differently in every way, shape, and form. And I think that's a whole other piece of it, online and in stores. And I think that's just something that we're sort of seeing. One of the reasons why we've been sort of changing our business model a little bit to sort of speak clearly to the man in men's sort of bespoke stores and speak clearly to the woman in stores that are for her, so that we're really sort of saying, okay, this is your experience, this is what you're looking for, this is your experience, this is what you're looking for. We acknowledge that they're not different, and we're not trying to make you shop like each other. Like, you are who you are. We want to cater to the way you are.
All right. Shoppers are different. Have they also changed since when you started?
I mean, the savvy element is incredible. I mean, they know prices, they know what other people are doing. I mean, again, it goes back to, a lot of them have done their research. They come into the store, they already know everything. They know the name of the pant, they know, if there's something similar at Ann Taylor, they know if there's something, the sweater looks like something, they know everything. They come in with the catalog dog-eared, but they might come in with someone else's catalog. Do you have something else? I mean, it's pretty incredible. It's a much more, when I first joined J.Crew, we were the only catalog really out there. I mean, there was LL Bean and Lange, but just kind of a different thing. And now, I mean, the marketplace is very, between the online information. So people are much more savvy, they're much more educated, and they and again, that's what I'm saying, they see through it. There has to be integrity there because they see through it. Or if they don't care, then they just want it to be bargain by basement price. So it's, there's a different, and that's changed, I think, just in the last, 10 years, honestly, just thinking back to it. I don't know if you've experienced that.
When you guys were talking before about what made a good store, I wonder, do you ever go to places that aren't stores per se, but you think could benefit from from having good retailing behind it, like at the Department of Motor Vehicles, or a museum, or or a doctor's office, or something like that?
Absolutely. One of the things I meet with every new employee, and one of the things I talk about is this idea of customer centricity. So for me, that means knowing your customer and really taking care of them. And when I ask the group the question, who takes care, outside of the retail world, who takes good care of you, I come across blank faces. Many of the people are transplants, so they have recent memories of airline experiences or cable company experiences or cell phone experiences. Sorry. And it's shocking how how little focus there is on the customer. And as a business person, it's just good business to satisfy people and to surprise and delight them. And I think that's true whether you're a doctor. Why do you have to, wait an hour when you go to see a doctor? I mean, it's absolutely incomprehensible to me. Why do hospitals have to be ugly? Why do you have to endure the visual pain of being in a hospital when you're sick? So, and I know Ron Johnson from Apple is working on, a new kind of hospital in California, which is so exciting. But I think there's such an opportunity to marry design with commerce, and to, quite frankly, to monetize design, and and that's the business that we're in.
Yeah, no, I think that's the sensibility you get into. I mean, it always amazes me where people are will dismiss sort of consumerism as being some kind of base activity, as opposed to kind of a very thoughtful way of behaving in a socialized, civilized manner, with other people that could be applied to, to hospitals or doctors' offices or the DMV or an airline, everything else, and how hard it seems to be to make that leap. And I think part of it is that. When you talk about being customer centric, I think that a lot of places who don't have sort of the gene of a shopkeeper somehow resident within them sort of assume that means tripling your market research budget, doing more and more exhaustive focus groups.
Michael, I don't think we've ever used a consultant ever. We may use one to come up with a racking system in a distribution center, so in an area that we know absolutely nothing about. But the thought of using an outside person to tell you who you are is I just can't comprehend. I do want to say one thing though back to the internet, because it sounds like there's some conflicting opinion here. You're younger than me, but maybe not too much younger. I think it's important for people. She does, of course. Yeah. But it's important for people of our generation, 10 years apart or not, to understand what it's like to be 10 years old or 12 years old, because those are our customers, 10 years, 15 years from now. And, just because we have trouble dealing with all of the information overload, they don't. And the world is changing. Facebook is 6 years old. It has 500 million Facebook accounts right now. It went up 100 million accounts in the last couple of months. I mean, this is happening, and you can either recognize that it's happening and figure out, how to adapt to it, or you can ignore it. And if you ignore it, you're not going to be here. I mean, you're going to be, like the department stores. Most of them are gone.
And you guys have a sense of what the next great store will be, what it'll do, what need is out there that somehow is trying to be fulfilled? Make $1 million? You know this.
I was going to say, I don't know if I'd tell you. I mean, I do think that's tricky. One of the things I think everyone has sort of been talking about, at least I know in my, friends and generation, which I'm not sure what that is, but I think is just what Apple has done to sort of change the shopping experience, how, things like the Genius Bar and really kind of how they're sort of setting you up to really to come in and experience. This is not, you don't have to buy anything. We're just here to help. We're just here to teach you. We're here to give you an experience and let you know that there's more about our products. We're sort of opening ourselves up to sort of say, hey, this is what we can do and this is what we offer. At the same time, you pick up, a cover for your iPhone and someone walks over to you and says, do you want to check out? And they check you out right there. I mean, and then that's very small. I'm just saying that's what's sort of happening now, and it's kind of, it's pretty incredible. At the same time, I do think there's something, again, that goes back to the type of shopper you are and the type of shopper you're looking for. Ultimately, we want the type of shopper who wants to hang out in the store. We want the person who wants to stay and experience and find something new and spend the extra 5 minutes and, then decide to go into the dressing room. We're not looking to kind of get them in and get out unless they really want that. And so how do you then, it's also diagnosing, like, what does this person want? Who are your customers? What are they looking for? And how to understand who they are and what's happening as that, that's a tricky thing, and it's not an easy thing. And also how to not, I think you brought up a good point of like what that 10-year-old shopper is looking at. There's so much about, so you just looked at this thing online and now we have your email address, but you happen to, we know you have your phone in your hands and you have a GPS, so we're going to email you and say, hey, by the way, we have that in stock in the store. That would probably freak me out. It's a little too Big Brother for me. But someone in 5 years, it's not going to be Big Brother to them. It might, my 12-year-old friends, kids, that's not Big Brother to them. They think that's cool and that they knew what somebody was looking at. Oh, you were looking at that line? Hey, it's on the store. You want to go look at it? Those kinds of things are happening. And again, it's like, what kind of retailer do you want to be? Do you want to be super high tech? And I think you have to acknowledge that, to your point, and figure out how it best works in with what you do and what your customer is looking for. Who is your customer? And again, we have a wide range of customers in terms of age. So it's like, how do you approach that? And how do you appease them and really and entice them?
Yeah. I was thinking a little bit about the difference between sort of, somehow respecting the relationship between respecting and listening to your customers, but leading them in a way. And I think, this is in the DR book, this idea that Jane and Ben, first and foremost, were like sort of putting together a store where they would like to shop. And I don't think there's anything in that store that you actually, no matter how many you could sell, that you actually didn't personally like, Or have. Is there still have, exactly, indeed. Is there anything that you guys have sold where you just kind of, in a way, couldn't figure out why anyone was buying it and you sort of wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole? You don't have to answer. That's an extreme way of putting it.
I'll answer it. Yeah. We have a rule about that. I mean, you're not allowed to buy it. Yeah. I don't care if we're going to sell it or not. If we wouldn't own it ourselves, we're not going to buy it. And we have a saying that we design up to the customer, not down to the customer. So, I agree with what you're saying. Too many people, and be it retailers or physicians or, name your poison, don't really respect the customer. And, I think that's a recipe for disaster. And I agree that you can lead the customer, but you can only lead a customer so far. When in my career, when I've made a mistake, it's when I've tried to, when I've been 2 steps ahead of the customer rather than maybe a half a step ahead. And, with maturity, you kind of learn where you are in a life cycle and when people are ready for things.
Is that the quintessential mistake you make in retailing, being too far ahead?
We make a lot of mistakes. Yeah.
I think that this, we're all sort of merchants on some level, and most of the stuff that you pick ends up being losers anyway. So you get used to this kind of failure, and any of us that think that we're that far ahead probably really aren't. I mean, maybe you have to, purchase stuff way enough in advance, but I think we've all been, humbled so many times by that you really don't consider yourself to either have omniscience or prescience or any of those things. I was just responding on new stores or what's going on or future. I have absolutely no idea, and I'm such a huge fan of Apple from breaking all the rules and this and that. But so maybe there's something that deals with some type of environmental things that are different. Like the farmers markets that we happen to have that are going on in a place like San Francisco are pretty exciting places, and they involve a place where people get together like once a week, and it's social, and it works for locals and it works for tourists, and you see a lot of different things coming together, and they involve people in community different ways. And it may be that we're to have legitimate, unique stores is really challenging, and so it comes down to all this kind of stuff. But I think people have been beaten up a little bit by not having such good store experiences, and by having some real, genuine, other personal experience. Maybe it's either more real or emotional or different, or it only happens so often, so you don't get.
I think it's a reaction to technology. I think and I forget the guy who wrote the Omnivore's Dilemma, Michael Pollan, maybe.
Pollan.
Yeah, but it's about connecting with the source. It's what you were talking about earlier. It's about connecting with the source of the product. I mean, you go to a farmer's market and you see who actually raised the vegetable or slaughtered the pig. You connect in a way that you don't connect online. Right. So I think one thing is feeding off another.
We got. Oh, sorry, Jenna.
No.
Okay. You can scratch your face or anything you want. You have time for some questions from the audience. If you put your hand up, I'll call on you and repeat your question if you say it loud enough for me to hear. And there's a microphone there that Aaron has, I think. If you scratch, there you go. Question right there.
I work for Neiman Marcus, and we don't have one person in our management team who has a degree, I would say a BFA. Do you have any employees in your management who have a BFA? Because my point is that creativity has left the business world.
You know, when I've been with our company, Wikipedia was wrong. I've been with the company 17 years. So I joined the company when it was a $45 million business. So it's been an amazing thing. But one of the joys of working at Bloomingdale's when I was there, and it was at the pinnacle of department store retailing, is they had this department called the Paradox Department. And they put the absolute best buyer in the Paradox Department. And her job and her only job was to identify new talent, new design talent. She had no fiscal responsibility whatsoever. And 9 things out of 10 were absolute failures. But the 10th thing was a, absolute bomb of a success, and it then got put into a parent department. And that's how Bloomingdale's identified people like Ralph Lauren and so on. And what I realized back then was you always need to budget a part of your open to buy or your store design spend or payroll budget or whatever on crazy money. And I love money. And because you can't, nothing is more boring than last year's bestsellers. Nothing is more boring than a risk-free retailer. And quite frankly, it's not the CFOs who take the risk. It's the artists. It's the artists who are emotional. It's the artists who have curiosity and so on. So we have 1,600 people in our home office. I would say of those 1,600, probably 300 of them, probably 350 of them are trained in art. They're fine artists of some sort. And I think part of our company's success is the fact that we understand the power, that's within those people. You have Jim Gold coming to run your business now. He's a friend. He's a phenomenal guy. You should talk to him about that because he'll listen and he understands that.
What about everyone else?
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm listening carefully as you are to what you just said, and I think it's fascinating. I think, I wish I could say that we had that sort of incredible level of artistry going on. I think there's a couple of things that are really different about our business model. One is that you sort of have all of those different people running their own stores, which I think if we had that set up, I think we would need that. I think our teams are in the stores are running their own stores. I mean, I think in our corporate offices, there's probably quite a few, but nowhere near. I mean, I think we're probably talking 10. It just so happens I have one, so I guess I count. And I do think that it's interesting. I work in a company where someone who has the title of president is actually a creative person. And I think that says a lot. I think it sends a pretty clear message to the company as a whole that we value creativity and we respect it and we think that it is valuable and for the greater good of the whole team. I do think we've also sort of given a lot of weight and emphasis on trying as best we can to kind of keep the creative pushing forward and allowing it room to grow. I think, I'm going to say back at the office some of the things that he just said and see what I think it's pretty fascinating. I do think that it's a great business model. And to your point though, I think it's tough. I think when you get one of the challenges of being a big company is how you stay small. And what do you do to stay small? We talked about shopkeepers and all of these things, and I think that you're doing some pretty incredible things and very intelligent things. It is the biggest challenge. As you get bigger, the pressure gets higher. As you get public, the pressure gets bigger. What do you do and how do you keep small? And so that's why, everything we're trying to do is sort of to get smaller. Again, as the web sort of gets bigger, how do you get smaller and get more intimate? And that's, again, I put a lot of weight on that and how do you use the creativity to do that?
I was going to ask you something really fast, Rob, based on what Glenn said. If last year's bestseller is sort of the most boring thing in the world, Design Within Reach sold like a lot of old stuff, as I recall.
Yeah.
Old stuff been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And yet
if it hadn't been in the market for 40 years, we weren't interested. Right.
And I would say there's a difference between home and apparel.
For sure. There probably is. Really,
big difference.
Yeah.
No, I think that's very true.
That's part of it too, and it's also part of you were selling to people who didn't know that stuff before, who had never had access to it before. In a way, it was new to them.
Yes, some and some not. But again, I think that the world's religion when you're talking about fashion and movement and change and something that you expect that you're going to pay more for it because you're going to want to have it for 20 years and you're sitting on it and using it. And also a very much more of a gallery concept, a unique product concept more than something that deals with a range and the complexity of things that you have when you adorn yourself.
Yeah, implied in that question was the idea there's a balance between, I guess, art and business to do this right. Mm-hmm. And you guys are interesting because you sort of seem to have internalized both functions as opposed to a management consultant who would say, chief creative officer, you worry about the art part, and then here's a CFO or an operations person who's going to worry about the business part. That model can work, I suppose, right?
And just so I'm clear, I don't oversee finance. They don't report into me. But it is a partnership, and I think there's a very valued partnership there. So, and I think understanding that and respecting that, I think the real thing to talk about is the fact that as the company knows that there's someone who has a creative background who has a very strong voice within the company, and that's really the message it's sending. And I think it's pervasive, and I think it's, I feel it just, in the meetings that we're in. It's like, okay, well, what do you want? It's like, oh, I get to say what I want, and maybe everyone will listen. And I think that, and I know that sounds silly, but at the same time, it gives you, to have that level of strength in your voice is nice, and especially when you're not, looking at the actual numbers. And of course, I pay attention to them, but I'm not, I have someone who's. Yep.
But I think that's the holy grail of the question, because you look at someone like Paul Pressler, who ran the Gap for a period of time after Mickey, and Paul's a lovely person and really smart, but not the most right-brain person. And look what happened. So, and I think that time will tell if dual management works. Or if you really need to find someone who's left brain, right brain. I mean, Jenna's boss, Mickey, is truly left brain, right brain. And I think most of the retail greats are.
Yep. Another question, maybe? Yes, right in the second row.
Hi. So you talked a little bit about your crazy money idea, and I just wanted to ask all three people. So I know a few companies have different processes in place so that their employees can, if they have a crazy idea, then they can perhaps make that into a product. So like Google is famous for having 20% time, and I think Marissa Meyer one year did a study where like half of their products they launched that year came out of 20% time. So I just was wondering if you could talk a little more about how crazy money is like formalized in like if I work for Urban or if I work for Anthropology, like can I be like, hey, I have a crazy idea, can I have some crazy money? Or like how does it work? And then also like I've heard it stay true that if some of the design team members, like if they just have an idea, they can make it somehow or it can be considered. And then on the flip side, I guess, I'm still getting to terms with what public does exactly, but I think that you like a customer can design their own bike to a certain extent, a little bit. So I was wondering if you could talk about like why you chose to do that and kind of like again, so just people being able to
So there's two questions and sort of. One just has to do with I think is sort of like using that idea of crazy money to expand that to just the idea of empowering employees to innovate on the company's behalf. I would say, which.
I can start on the end. So what we do, one of the things when I first joined the company years ago, and for a very long time, we had a process where we would design the line, and that line would be designed around sort of what the merchants or the buyers had come to us and said, hey, I need 10 pair of pants, and I need them to be $78, $88, $98, and $100. And we would go and sort of say, okay, this fabric will make this kind of a pant, and we literally just sort of filled a slot and said, okay. And if you look back, I mean, it was very formulaic. Again, it was a catalog, so we were also designing into pages. So it was a very different process. As we became a bricks and mortar company, that formula for designing into catalog just didn't really work very well because there was just no magic involved in that. So when Mickey joined, and I, he's probably one of the most sort of fearless men I've ever met. He said, you know what? I don't want you guys to talk to the merchants. Here's a budget, which was incredibly large, and he said, go design the line, and I don't want to look at it until you're ready to present it. So now what we have is a very sort of large development budget, which we call, and each design team, there's a women's team, and within that women's team, there's someone who specializes in sweaters, someone who specializes in knits, shoes, et cetera. Same thing for crew cuts and men's, and also Madewell, which is another brand. And basically, the team is really allowed to do what they want. They have to be responsible, and I think that's really, again, sort of empowering the people who are talented, but also saying, like, okay, you have to have some responsibility here. It's like you can't make everything $500. We have to sell something. And there are often things on the board that I'm like, I don't know what that is, but okay, like that, it looks crazy. And then sometimes those crazy things are crazy, and sometimes those crazy things are amazing. And it's really hard to sort of, it's not a science. Like that sketch doesn't necessarily just magically turn into a garment. Sometimes the fabric is not the way you thought, or sometimes, it just doesn't tailor right, or sometimes you put it in your body and like, I don't look so cute. And then sometimes it actually is just magical. So I think we don't really say, okay, here's what you have to design. We say, okay, you have a budget, knock yourselves out. And sometimes we lay the floor down on the line, and the line down on the floor, and we say, you know what, we have a couple of holes, and we go back and we fill them. And we're like, you know what, that's not totally working, and that's not filling that bucket, or wow, you know what, that thing that you designed is really amazing, but we kind of need to tweak it because it's not really. So it's changed the process, and I think it's made the design team so much more engaged and really feeling empowered to be able to try things and to experiment and not feeling like, they're sort of designing into a box necessarily. And it's also, I think, allowed us to push the envelope. I think, every season we've sort of pushed a little farther. This thing has come in. It's like, well, next thing I know, there's a feather vest on the line. It's like, oh, okay, why not? Let's try it, and we buy 20 of them and we see what happens. And it allows you to experiment, and it also allows you to surprise your customer. And I think that is, again, sort of one of the things we've been talking about is just, you have to have the opportunity to try and surprise the design team, me, Mickey, and the customer. How does that feel? And really have the opportunity to do that. And it's fun.
Yeah, and Glenn used that word too, surprise and delight, right?
Yeah, and I would say for us it's a little bit different. I think the process for us is more company-wide. So we certainly encourage the designers to take risks, but we also encourage the store managers to take risks. I mean, I have a saying, there's one rule in the company: you can't steal. Everything else is a guideline, okay? Everything else is a guideline. And if you're new, follow the guidelines. But as you understand the customer and the way the company works, break the guidelines. And, because we hired you, which means you're smart and you care and you understand what it is we're trying to do. So, I think that creativity comes in all shapes and forms. I mean, I think we have one of the most creative supply chains in the industry, which allows us to maneuver our inventory much more quickly than most people, which allows the merchants to take more risk because they can react more quickly. So I think we have one of the most creative technology groups. So for us, creativity is a way of being in the entire company, and risk-taking is a way of being for everybody. And it's a cultural thing. You also have to teach people not to be afraid of failure. You actually have to teach people to like failure. Because without failure, doesn't come. Learning comes with failure, and nothing comes with no failure. I mean, it's boring. So,
do you want to talk about public a little bit, Rob?
Well, I can only because there's that. Well, no, but we're a small company with five full-time people, and the only thing we really have in common with these guys is we don't spend any money on advertising, and we don't do any market research, and the founder is crazy. But it's true in researching this industry and thinking about bringing what we know about specialty retailing and merchandising to a world that's bike-ish. I've spent 3 years going to all the shows, all the places around the world, over in Europe, anywhere else. There aren't any crazy people that come out of the bike world. And for us to make our business succeed, we're going to have to bring people in who are both risk takers, who are creative, who can think about how we dress up a bike properly and approach very different customers. So the lack of that is very apparent in the industry that I'm in, and it'll be a welcome change when we get some. When we have our pot of crazy money. We don't have one of those quite yet. But
somewhere it is out there.
It's really important, I think, to if you don't have money to beat people into submission, you have to surprise them and delight them and have them just kind of go, I can't believe that. It's so cool. That's what you're going to do.
Well, who are your customers?
Pardon me?
Who are your customers that are any different?
The customers aren't, well, they're outside the traditional biking world. I mean, our customers are 70% women, and 80% of bikes are sold to guys. So we're having to completely rethink the way in which someone would approach a bicycle and how they would use it.
Oh. One last question there.
It's really a comment, but I think that anthropology is one of the most amazing display departments that I have ever seen. And I wondered what percentage of your budget goes to display, and what happens to the displays when they're finished, and who actually makes them, and in what country?
Well, we have all of our displays are made. Virtually all of the displays are made in the store. And back to the question about artists or fine art degrees. I was just talking about the home office. Every one of our stores, and this is Urban Outfitters as well, has at least 2 full-time artists working in them. And some of the larger stores have as many as 10 or 12 full-time artists working in them. And they treat the stores as their canvas. And you know, we don't spend money on traditional advertising. That's where we spend money. Because our belief from the day we were founded was to underpromise and overdeliver. So we always wanted to make the store experience, or now our website experience, so compelling that, you know, that the customers kept coming back and they told their friends about it.
Anthropology tends to be a fantasy experience. I mean, you can go in there and be really uplifted by the sheer energy.
I'm going to hire you for our next PR campaign. I love you, just so you know. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
But I think that idea of display, which of anthropology is really super romance. It goes back to, I think, one of the early questions that you answered, Jenna. It just has to do with when you go in a store that works, you can tell that someone has taken some care with every detail. And a lot of times it's things that you could easily do without. I remember the catalogs for DWR that would have the biographies of, you know, architects that I knew well because I went to design school, but most people who got the catalog probably might have been the first time they actually saw a picture of Mies van der Rohe, let's say, you know. And you could sell chairs without that information. In a way, someone would say, well, who cares? But I think it does seem to be about giving your customers something extra above and beyond the merchandise that makes the merchandise
We had a
special.
coffee bar. I joined the company when there was one Anthropology, and we had a coffee bar in that first Anthropology, and I went to get a cup of coffee, and I asked the person behind the counter, who eventually became the creative director for Anthropology, where the sweet and low was. And she said, we don't have sweet and low. And I said, why not? And she said, because it's ugly. And this was before I joined the company. And I said, oh my God, I found my home. You know, and you know, it's amazing, but there are so many details that, and you do need a Mickey kind of compulsion, you know, so many details that go into making a store or a website or a product or a book, you know, beautiful. And you got to pay attention. You know, retail is detail. That's like 101. You got to pay attention to details.
Yeah, so one last question from me. How's business?
Good, great.
Excellent.
Just off the charts.
So I want to thank our three panelists, Jenna Lange, Ben, Rob. A big round of applause. Our guest of honor this evening is Jane Thompson. She's going to meet you upstairs where there's a lot of books to look at and to sign and to socialize. And so we'll see you all upstairs at the reception for the DR book. So join us up there, please. Thank you very much.